Hello and welcome back to Small Steps to Self-Love. My name is Shelby Leigh. I'm an author and self-love advocate. And throughout this season of the podcast, I've had some wonderful guests on to share some really incredible tips and strategies for building more self-love and confidence in our lives. There are so many things that go into our mental health and so many different ways and techniques that we can try to add more self-love to our lives. We've talked about burnout, we've talked about mindset, we've talked about success and beauty and self-sabotage. We've talked about strategies for coping with anxiety. We've talked about how creative writing can help our mental health. So much has been covered in this season, and I asked on Instagram in my broadcast channel what you wanted to see for this next solo episode, and most people voted for the top self-love tips I've learned from a year of doing this podcast, because July has been 1 year since starting Small Steps to Self-Love, which is so exciting. So I wanted to recap 5 self-love tips that I have learned from this season of the podcast and recap them for you. The first one is with Christy Pask, who was one of our guests this season. She's a fellow marketer, but she also talks a lot about mindset and how that can affect running your own business. And we talked a lot about burnout in this episode. And one of the tips that I really took away from this episode was that we have to continue doing things that we love to avoid burnout and really pay attention to the signs, be in tune with ourselves and recognize when we are feeling burnout, when we start to feel fatigue or overwhelmed or not as passionate about things as we used to, and really focus on that and realize that if we are feeling that way, we should be incorporating more things that we love into our routine as best as we can. For me, that looks like making sure that I always set aside time to write, because sometimes life gets really busy, my business gets really busy, and I forget one of my true passions, which is opening up a journal and writing. And when I don't do that, I don't feel good. It really helps me feel better. And so that's something that I look to whenever I'm feeling burnt out. So recognizing what that might be for yourself, maybe jotting it down and paying attention and making sure that you work that into your schedule can be so helpful. The next thing that I learned from Bridget Burrick-Brown, who was on an episode about redefining beauty, is really that if we continue to think of beauty as society standards, we're always going to be hard on ourselves for not meeting those standards. So really thinking about how we ourselves can redefine beauty and find beauty in ourselves, find beauty in other things in the world besides just what is shown to us as beautiful can be really, really powerful. So one, thinking about what's beautiful about you, but also knowing that society's expectations or standards don't have to apply to us either. And there are beautiful things about all of us that should be recognized and loved. Next was Byron Morrison, who talked to us a lot about self-sabotage and really how our minds can affect our self-love and our mental health. He had a great point about recognizing that our mind tells us stories. It plays tricks on us that we are going to fail or not succeed, but we don't know for a fact that we are going to fail. It's just our mind telling us we will. And so pushing past that, not letting our minds sabotage us, and coming forward with confidence and saying, no, actually I can do this, and I won't know until I try, can be really helpful. I also really liked his technique of 90-day goal setting versus looking at yourself 1 year from now or 5 years from now. Setting more tangible goals within a 90-day period is really beneficial and not as overwhelming as looking at, 5 years down the line and everything that you could accomplish. Instead, just setting small goals for the next 90 days and then looking at all that you've accomplished in those 90 days. Christy Kennedy had a wonderful episode about self-confidence, especially as an introvert, but really just overall boosting your confidence in yourself. And one of my favorite lines from that episode was, "You have to be willing to do things afraid." That line really resonated with me throughout this entire season of recording the podcast. And I think it's so true whenever I look at my own experiences. Doing things afraid is how I've really grown. And stepping out of your comfort zone can be so beneficial. When it comes to public speaking for me, or even launching this podcast, I was afraid. Leaving my job, I was afraid to pursue my own passions. But all of these things have turned out so well. There are going to be things that don't turn out well too. There are things that I've done afraid that haven't worked out as well as I wanted to, but there are also so many things that have. So doing things afraid really gets us out of our comfort zone, but it's also how we grow and find new passions that we love and new experiences. It's okay to be a little bit afraid, a little anxious. So that line really stuck with me. And from Amy Eaton's episode, we talked about redefining success. And this one was a big one for me. This conversation stuck with me. I work with Amy on a professional level. We're in a mastermind group together, so we know about each other's businesses. And so it was a bit of a more personal conversation about money mindset and what success looks like. And I think it's so important to redefine success beyond just money or income or numbers, and really look at what makes your life fulfilling and your job or career fulfilling. We could always be striving for the next promotion or the next pay raise, and those are important things to shoot for if that's something that you are looking for in your life. But there are also other ways to define success too. So I want to encourage you to really set aside time to think about the successes that you've had and the accomplishments that you've achieved. I know I don't do this enough, just sit down and actually think about what I've achieved. I move on to the next thing really quickly. And then we let all of our amazing accomplishments fade into the background and not be celebrated. So redefine success for yourself. You can absolutely shoot for more income, a better job, a promotion, whatever that looks like for you, but also think about other areas of success in your life. Maybe it's being an amazing parent, or writing a book, or finding a job that's less pay but that you enjoy more, and your happiness is your success. So really think about how you can redefine success for yourself. So those are the 5 things that I have learned and taken away from this season. There are, of course, so many other things that we've covered and learned in this season. If you want to check out any of the past episodes, I encourage you to do so because there were so many great tips shared. But I wanted to quickly read a poem for you from Girl Made of Glass. I don't think I've talked about this book since the beginning of this season, but my newest book came out in January of this year, and the response has been amazing. So I really appreciate anyone that has picked up the book. I did also record the audiobook, which is available online as well. So if you like hearing me talk, you can get the whole book of me reading it as well. But this is one of my personal favorites, and I think it fits in really well for this podcast. I am welcoming myself back with open arms, loving myself with a full heart. If you don't know where to begin, forgiving yourself is a beautiful start. And that's what this podcast aims to do, is help all of us come back to self-love, or introduce us to self-love if we haven't really experienced that before. And forgiving yourself for any past neglect of past self-doubt or hatred towards yourself, or those negative thoughts that we tell ourselves. Just start fresh. That doesn't mean you're going to never have a negative thought about yourself again, but forgive yourself for that past and start moving forward, because always thinking about the negative is not really going to help us move forward. So I wanted to leave you on that and share that this is the last episode for season 2. I honestly am not entirely sure if season 3 is going to happen this year, when I will be back exactly. So I am taking a little bit of a break from the podcast. It has been so wonderful chatting with new people every single week. But to be totally transparent with you, I have a lot of other content that I create every single week. And this one has been falling down on the priority list a little bit, because even though it's been an awesome year and I've stepped out of my comfort zone and recorded a lot of great episodes and met a lot of great, amazing new people, I haven't seen what I was hoping for from this podcast. And I also create a lot of new content every single week on social media. I have another YouTube channel that I manage, and I'm also writing my 4th book. And I need to take advice from this podcast about prioritizing the things that I enjoy doing, that I find fulfilling, and leave myself time to do the things that I love as well. And even though I do enjoy this podcast, there are other priorities that I have. And so I am taking a bit of a break I will keep you updated on social media. So if you enjoy following along, I would love to have you over on TikTok and Instagram at Shelby Leigh Poetry. You can also subscribe to my newsletter at shelbyleigh.co/subscribe. I will have the link in the description as well if you want to get on my email list and stay up to date with what I'm working on. You'll also get self-love affirmation cards and a self-love print whenever you sign up for my email list too. I really appreciate the listeners who are on here every single week. I remember being shocked a couple months into the podcast that we had already reached, I think, around 5,000 downloads, and now it's been a year and it's continued to grow, which is so awesome. So I really appreciate all of you for listening to the episodes every single week or popping in when one interests you. I hope that you found some value in the conversations from season 2, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.